So, what was it like going from an all male Tabor, very like gung ho, as you said, to a mixed Tabor, fighting alongside women? And was it more ideological as well? Would you
To
say?
be honest, in the all male Tabor, they were a bit less gung ho. I mean,
Oh yeah,
because some of them were proper mountain fighters with years of experience. I mean, where you tend to find the more what can I say? The kids, the less experienced and less capable kids are in the more orthodox Tabors actually. I think Saran's Tabor, although it did have all kinds of problems, when Saran was around, they tended to have their act together, and they were pretty good and pretty efficient, which is why they had a fairly good reputation, I think, a bit of status, and used to get given a fair bit of work, if that's the way to put it. The more again, funny to even use the word orthodox of something like the Yepagay, but the more usual sorts of Yepagay Tabors, the mixed Tabors, that was where you'd find as I say, the kids, the more gung ho, less careful, less responsible.
what about the women in particular? How did you find that? Because that would be quite a new experience.
I'd equate the women and the men equally in terms of combat effectiveness and professionalism and so on. I mean, compared to a Western Army, very low. But you stop comparing them to a Western Army and just try and work with what they've got and try and build on what they've got right.
But I think for a lot of people here, even now, I mean, it's in the last certainly in the last decade, definitely even I've seen a big change in the last 5 years. Women are becoming more seen in military roles now, but
They are, yes, but for me, that wasn't such a jump because I did my basic training in the British Army with women in 1995. Because I joined the logistics corps initially. I eventually switched and went to something all male later on in my own short army career, short and not very glittering. So being alongside armed women in a military context wasn't something I had to adjust to. Actually, I was always fine with it. And some of the women were fine to work with, and some of them, like some of the young men, were a bit of a nightmare, very irresponsible and dangerous. But there's no gender division to that.
Yeah.
No, honestly, there really isn't. Not for me.
But still, I don't think the British Army would have had women on the front lines. But
Not on the front lines, not in infantry roles, no.
Yeah.
No, they didn't.
Because I know they're big on equality in the training and we go through it the same way here, but there wasn't that, and to see equality on the front line, to see.
No, that's come more and more since I was in the army.
Yeah.
I think women can do things like commando training now.
Yeah.
Very few of them do. It's physically really grueling and rigorous, and very few, women I think physically are just up to it without sustaining damage. But they can. It's open to them.
And a lot of these were ordinary women that hadn't been preparing their whole lives, running and training. These were women that other options would have been marriage or very little else in some situations. And
you're talking about the Kurdish women?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think for a lot of people, they just make that decision, at some point. They look around at what life's offering them, in their village or in their city like Istanbul or whatever, or, the southern Turkey, and it must be a momentous decision to say, right, I'm joining the resistance.
And did you see them happy in that? How do you think that it turned out for them?
Oh, I think a lot of them were very, very happy. I remember one young girl, she was 16, she died. In my view, a 16-year-old shouldn't. She died. But she was super happy. She wanted to be exactly where she was, with the other young teenage girl fighters, you know, in the tabor, she was never miserable, even when everybody else was. Always laughing, always, you know, helping and, you know, happy and trying to cheer people up. And there were a lot like her. There was a really good spirit. That's the thing about the YPG. It's the spirit of it, you know, as I'm sure you've experienced and seen and felt yourself. You know, they sing and dance. You know, they get around the fire. They share things. You know, it's fantastic in some ways, and the kids embody that. They really do. Much frustrating as hell that they can be, and dangerous and blasé and as they can be and irresponsible. They really do embody that revolutionary, you know, spirit. In some ways, they're full of life, and that's something hard to reconcile with when, like you say, you know, that whole sense that to them life seems to be cheap. You know, I don't quite subscribe to that. I think the life of the individual is subordinated to the life of the collective and the ongoing life of the collective, and that's what, you know, largely accounts for the martyr culture. But you know, that spirit is something, you know, unforgettable, really.
No, I don't say that life is cheap or anything, but like when all you have is each other, that's like you say that you said before, they have a saying, "No friends but the mountains," and that can be a perspective for a lot of peoples put into that same position. And when you do feel that like all you have is each other and all that's kept your culture alive is resistance, then I think it's a lot easier of a decision to in that moment, if something's gonna happen, to just say, I do think it is an individual decision rather than something that comes too much from above.
You mean to join the resistance and
To take the ultimate step, to die if you need to. I think when those moments come, I don't think it comes from. Obviously, there's always times that it does. If there's a culture of it, which there absolutely is, then that's a fact. But from a lot of what I've seen, people making those kind of sacrifices and knowing them from before, they would have ended up making that.
I don't know. I can't account for it personally. I really can't.
I do think a lot of it comes from
you may be right.
keeping what you have alive, because all that you have is each other, rather than losing something.
Yeah, so I think in that way we agree then. Again, that the individual is less important than the group or the collective or the future generations.
That's just a perspective I can definitely say that I've seen from individuals themselves that have made that ultimate. Like when it comes, even if it's a split-second moment, when it is a decision to put yourself that extra bit further where you know you can't come back.
The second time I went to Shanghai, I was on Nobet one night with a guy, dead now, Tirej his name was, and we were up at night on Nobet, moonlit night, very quiet, and he was telling me about the training in the mountains, and he says, you know, and this to me seemed very close to not a suicidal wish or a death wish, but something, the way he phrased it, not too far. He said, our commander, sometimes when we're in training, they'll throw a grenade in. It's a dummy grenade, but nobody knows it. And everybody's racing to be the first to throw themselves on that grenade. And when they do go on an attack, sometimes if people get held back, they get so frustrated. And I've sort of seen a bit of this, not to this extreme level, but I've seen it a bit in the regular game. They said, if you don't let me in the first group, if you don't let me in the attack group, you know, which is probably going to lose, you know, some people that night, then I'm gonna suicide. I'm gonna shoot myself if you don't let me in that. And it's that level of commitment and intensity, which again, I coming from a completely different background, you know, I'm not afraid to fight, but I don't think I would ever, you know, get to
But
that point.
at least to
With
that.
my background, my society, my upbringing, and so on.
No, I can understand that perspective being shocking. Definitely. I mean, a lot of it is like you just have to. From what I've seen, I can see people acting that way. Certainly, like, oh, if you don't let me go, I'm gonna kill myself. But a lot of it is just showing the ultimate passion, and but they're not actually gonna kill themselves. I've never seen anything like that happen. There's enough ways to die there that I don't.
Well, one or two, yes. I mean, I've seen one or two people. One guy did. One guy did commit. Not a couple of people actually out there have attempt suicide, and at least one was successful. But this, I'm talking about something common. I'm talking about a place in which people will typically, be prepared to kill themselves if they're not allowed to go on what might as well be a suicide run, an attack where they're probably going to die anyway. The case of one or two can always be explained away. It's just the individual. But for this to be something, ordinary or almost ordinary.
But it's something you do see with a lot of militaries around the world. It's a very big military culture, especially as you go further east, definitely. But even to that story of the grenade, I know that's a thing they do in like East Asian militaries, just a standard culture. I've seen it a lot in definitely in American Marines. They'll do that. The same thing, dummy grenade into a bunch of guys, see who jumps on it.
To see who jumps on it, yeah. But in that case, do you really have the whole room fighting to be the one on that grenade? That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
That's just impractical.
That's how it is. That's the difference I was trying to...
I saw a lot of ideological fervor, definitely.
Most military, paramilitary, and, call them fighting units that I've seen in different places, whether it's Hezbollah or the Palestinians, whatever, have more concern for survival, because if a soldier doesn't survive, he's not much use as a soldier anymore. If only for that reason. Most other kinds of fighting groups that I've seen, be they Orthodox Western armies or whatever, are still concerned to stay alive. I've never seen that at such a low level as in the Yapagay.
Yeah, well, I think it can come from.
And I've got, we've talked about different reasons why it might be. I don't know if I'll ever quite understand it.
No, I think I can understand it. I can't say I support it definitely, but I think I can understand it. But we've gone into it quite a bit there.
Yeah, let's not get too bogged down on that particular point because
So you were telling me about Tal Hamas. Did you get to the city?
The city was taken. Daesh just fled. Which again, when this happens in the Yapagay, people are really disappointed. Yeah. Those who've been denied their chance to fight get very, very depressed and that's when tabors get dysfunctional and sort of turn on each other a bit. I've seen it. And Tal Hamas fell without a fight, so a lot of people didn't get into battle at all on that campaign. And those who did, again, just had mostly village skirmishes. I mean, Serikani and Haseki, they were big. They were big battles that sort of went on for a while. The next time, I mean, most of my time was just village fight after Shengal, fighting from village to village in small towns. Tal Nasser was a village we fought and then retreated from. And I can't remember which operation came next, actually. It wasn't Al Hol. There was definitely stuff in between then. I think, yes, the Abdulaziz Mountains. We fought at the Abdulaziz Mountains. And then I crossed over from the Yapagay Tabor back into Saransk Tabor, and we fought at the Abdulaziz Mountains as well. There was a lot of stuff on those plains at the foot of the mountains, and also up into the the higher ground. A lot of again, small fighting to do there from villages and small towns. Take one, go and take another. Push them out, fight, and that was most of what I spent my time doing when I was fighting. And after
that kind of village fighting, you're usually in quite small teams, aren't you?
Yeah, sometimes they come together though, and sometimes there are too many actually. We took one, and it was just so badly coordinated because there were just a bunch of different units all together. And none of them really knew what each other were doing. They're just racing through the town. One group got to the far end of the town. There was still shooting coming from the beginning of the town where others were, and they started shooting back towards the bullets, and it was all a bit chaos actually.
It does happen, but
yeah, mostly in small groups. I mean, I was usually a combination of either a rifleman or a machine gunner on a Humvee, sometimes both, jumping in and out. And yeah, that was how most of my time in Rojava shaped up after Shengal, actually. And we had the Al Hol operation, which is actually a really good one. Things really came together on that. You know, we took the outlying areas. You know,
I mean, tactically, it was well planned.
Yeah, we took casualties, but tactically, it worked quite smoothly. Yeah.
Were you very happy with that at the end of that? Then was there a sense of?
Yeah, it's a good one. Again, there was I mean, some operations, you know, they just seem to be a bit ragged, and you know, that one. Well, A, it worked. B, casualties weren't that high. And yeah, I think that was just a really good, again, some of that jubilant spirit which we'd seen on the Tel Hamas campaign before things really got, you know, just stuck in really, and you know, we started to take casualties. There was a bit of that on the Al Hol campaign. Yeah.
And like you spoke before about what drew you to that, like initially seeing these, like the women in the bright headdresses defending their town against Daesh, and then learning about.
Well, that wasn't what drew me. That was just what was in the news. So that's how I became aware of it.
And then you saw
the same way everybody became aware of it.
And the equality that they were fighting for, and the ideological side of
things. Yeah.
And so that's what brought you. Did you get to see much of that in action when you were over there?
I didn't see much of civil society. I mean, we had the odd few days in a city, you know, walking around Kobani, a bit in Tel Hamas, but no, I didn't really have time to see any of that. You know, that social side of things, the collectives and so forth. I mean, we stayed at one or two of them, but no, I didn't really get to really get involved with that or see it at any you know, deeper level.
And what was the
reception? Just fighting. It just wasn't. We were usually out in the sticks, you know.
So did you spend much time around civilians at all? Would there be civilians around when you were doing a lot of the fighting?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, there were long periods in between fighting, but we usually weren't in areas where you could really see much of that. You know, those egalitarian.
Even just for things in action, like ordinary villages and that. What was the reception like for you?
Mostly very friendly to us. Mostly very friendly. Sometimes a bit suspicious, a bit sceptical. I mean, some villages less friendly than others, you know, because, you know, Daesh had obviously got to them first, and maybe said to them, you know, we won't hurt you, but don't help the YPG. Or maybe some villages are more friendly to Daesh. Some were just playing it both ways, you know, for their own survival. You know, you can't really know, especially with the language level and the language barrier. You can't really know. Most were friendly. Most were friendly and welcoming, and you know, seemed quite happy to have us there. Others didn't seem so happy. It's things that you can't really, unless you really spend a much longer time there and learn much more of the language, I think, and stay in one place. Then maybe you can sort of gradually get more of an understanding of how this dynamic is really working in the rural areas. But we were moving so fast, and you know, for all the other reasons, no, I didn't really get it. You kind of have to sort of trust, really, that this is for the best. I mean, which isn't hard. You know, Daesh have to be kicked out of this area. That's fairly certain. Are we doing it in a good way? Most of the time, mostly, yeah, with mistakes. And beyond that, you know, the feeling of the locals, if you're asking me about that, not always easy to gauge. Generally positive, I'd say. Beyond that, yeah.
I mean, for my time, I feel like it was a very jubilant time. Like I would have got there towards like just when Daesh was being finished up. I think because of that, there was no more which way could it go. It was just finally it's over, finally
Right.
dead.
Sure.
So I think I do remember it being a very jubilant time for all the
And the
people around.
YPG were less concerned, or the SDF as it was by then, less concerned to sort of capture ground, I would suppose. I mean, there was still stuff going on the plains of Deir ez-Zor in your time, but I don't think it was so much a case of taking villages, if I'm right, more just a case of rooting out pockets of
No,
enemy.
I mean
and
that's
so
that's
on.
that's what they were doing in Deir ez-Zor, but by the time after Raqqa, which was the capital city of ISIS, there was
Hmm.
the pockets would have been dealt with by like different police forces, almost and like anti-terror.
Right. Okay.
And there were occasional attacks, which is why the military structure and all the infrastructure was all maintained, because it would take a small cell to do a lot, and that kind of thing did happen. But
So there wasn't that potential fear of the YPG, because obviously the Daesh had told YPG there's all sorts of bogus stories about what they're going to do to you and so on, so that they wouldn't
told
help
the
us.
civilians.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. All sorts of horror stories about what the Kurds will do if they take your village.
Mm.
And so that wouldn't have been a thing
Oh,
in your time.
yeah, it was very
Again,
much.
Raqqa had fallen, Daesh had fled.
Those were the times of the hijabs being thrown off, and
Yeah,
which,
yeah.
not,
We saw a bit of
hijabs,
that as well.
Niqabs.
Yeah, and we saw a bit of that on the Al Hol operation as well,
Yeah.
actually, but a lower scale, much lesser. But yeah, old women walk around smoking again, and yeah, all that. I mean, that was what made Al Hol good, actually. Was the locals, in fact, and the reaction we got. I remember we were driving in convoy into Al Hol city, and they were all coming out with glasses of tea on trays and stuff. And I was chucking in packets of cigarettes, and it was that sort of that was really what made Al Hol a more positive thing, and gave it that bit of spirit that we'd had in the Tal Hammas days. Actually, yeah. Now that you mention it, it was the reaction of the locals, yeah, and to know that this is what they want here. We're not just imposing our thing.
It's a great feeling.
But in Afrin, as I understand it, there was quite a jubilant spirit prior to the invasion. I mean, there were crowds in the streets.
From what I was around at the time that the Afrin invasion was going on. From what I know of the Afrin invasion, because the YPG had overcome so much, like with a lot of support, obviously, but they'd gone from Kobani with a few rifles between them to almost half of Syria, a state with freedom and equality and so many great things. There was I'm sure there was a big sense of invincibility.
So you think the townsfolk of Afrin thought that the invasion was just going to be repelled, and they had such faith in the SDF and the YPG because of their prior successes in Raqqa and elsewhere.
Yeah, and they hadn't the Afrin canton, from what I understand,
it had never been touched by Daesh before, and that was the one place.
It had never been touched by any aspect of the civil war.
It was an enclave.
Peacefully pushed
People
out
used to go
Assad's forces and had like the jubilant revolution
and refugees from the Syrian civil war used to go to Afrin and find safe haven there.
From what I know about the landscape as well.
So do you think that's why they didn't prepare better for the Turkish invasion then? Because they just expected that it would be okay?
They had no experience of war. Like, I don't, it's not my place to, I mean, and from what
nor mine, I wasn't there. But
criticisms were made to the people in charge, and self-criticisms were made by them.
Yeah.
But it's not my place to judge an entire defensive infrastructure.
No, I don't judge. I just wonder why. I just wonder why they had so long to prepare.
From my perspective and understanding of what I've been made aware of, they didn't have the experience of war. From what I've heard, that place looked like Switzerland. It was all hills, green hills, and olive groves everywhere you go. They had the goods, like access to Turkey. They got all the best European style Turkish products, like stuff that you wouldn't get in the rest of Rojava. yeah, they just like, I guess you can talk about complacency or the feeling of invincibility. It was all over the. I mean, for the ordinary, I think for the military structure, especially uh, those that had to flee Turkey, um, they were always aware of the overall threat and how ISIS had been allowed, how Daesh had been allowed to take so much power, which wouldn't have happened without the support of Turkey.
Mm.
But for the ordinary Syrian people who weren't aware of the wider connotations of things, I don't think they'd have even expect that kind of thing to happen. I think they were very much like ISIS is done, civil war is over, we can relax.
Mm. Yeah.
But Al-Hol, was that towards the end for you in Rojava?
Towards the end, yeah, not my very last operation, but my second to last, actually. Yeah, a high note. And then after that, two things, I think. Well, there was a bunch of things. I left at the end of the year because I was actually very tired. The next operation we went on, Commander Saran, wasn't around very much. As I say, when he was around, we were really good. When he wasn't, a few people had been swapped in and swapped out, and we had a couple of bad characters actually. And the Tipple was just very, very unruly. When the cat was away, the mice would play, and I was leader of the Western group within that Tabor by then, and it was my responsibility to just keep everybody basically safe, and also at times to make sure the Kurds are doing their no-bet and and acting semi-properly. And it was very, very tiring. And I had to constantly be on top of people, constantly looking out and watching, And one night we were based in a house between Tel Tamer and Serikania on the main road. We'd just taken this house, squatted in it, if you like. We heard 3 explosions, and we raced down in the night to Tel Tamer. And Daesh had set 3 car bombs off in the middle of town. Buildings were down, telegraph poles were down, rubble, and people trying to drag people out of rubble, and half collapsed buildings. And Tel Tamer had been a safe town. I mean, we pushed Daesh so far west, started in Jizre and pushed them so far west, and south, that no one, I think, really thought there was much of a threat in Tel Tamer. And then they struck, And I spent hours trying to get people out of rubble, dead and dying people. There was no coordination. The Red Crescent Centre itself had been bombed, so that was gone. There were no medics around, no kit, no bandages, no nothing. We're just getting people out, and it was pretty devastating actually. Just the inability to really do anything effective. And after that, and then the operation, I don't know what the operation was actually called, but we were around the area of the Tishreen Dam and taking ground around that area. Again, more fighting as before, most of it pretty low level, village fighting, place to place, machine gunning from a Humvee and so forth, a bit of rifle action on the ground. And again, constantly trying to, keep this unruly bunch in check and look after the Westerners. And at the end of that, I ended up persuading my group to cross and go to a more regular Tabor. I said, look, when Saran's around, this is a really good unit to be in. When he's not, well, you can see for yourselves. And I saw them out, to a more regular unit, and I decided that was my job done for the time being. And I came back, went to France for a bit, and then came back to the UK. Might have recuperated again and gone back if it wasn't for the police trouble and the anti-terrorism dimension and the subsequent, investigation and charges that I faced here, which really made it difficult. I could still have got back there, but it would have made it extremely difficult. Yeah. It wouldn't have been worth it.
Just before we get onto that, just to give as full a picture of your experiences as I can, could you just describe, like, there's no generic, every time it's different, but but most of the time you were there, it was village to village fighting. Roughly go through what you're looking at when you're looking to take a Daesh village or move forward. What's the
It'd be a bit
process?
different every time. Sometimes we'd call an air support, sometimes we just wouldn't have it. Usually we'd send the Hummers in first and sort of, if you like, soften things up. Horrible expression. With the machine guns. You know, I was a machine gunner in the turret of a Humvee, and so that would be usually the first, and then we'd advance in on the ground after that and clear the buildings and fight and clear the remaining Daesh out one way or another, if you like, whatever it took. It could play out different ways.